You stumble through the winding tunnel, acutely aware that behind you stands a swirling mass of sycophants, the somber nature of praise etched upon their faces. Your feet are sore, it's hard to breathe, yet you press on, remembering what befell the last academic to flee through the ossuaries. Finally, after what feels like days, your feet find the cusp of a small cleft outcrop by the wayside of the main passage. Wind blows through the opening and you sense the proximity of an absurdly large space before you. The followers behind you clearly agree, their eyes boring into the back of your neck, as if daring you to move. Stepping forwards into the massive opening, your feet struggle to find purchase on the now evident slope before you. Tumbling down the angular pile of stones, the space before you comes into view. A sea of followers stretches as far as the eye can see, worshipping something that's far out of view. You comprehend, but you can't possibly understand. This is beyond rationality. Tucked away in the shadows, obscured within paragraphs of dialogue, hides the Moonlit Faith. You likely don't know them well, but I do. They're name-dropped in dialogue over and over, but they're not actually present in the game besides speaking to NPCs and reading books, God forbid. This has kept the Moonlit Faith and their Lullaby Isles out of online coverage. They're effectively invisible, or they were until now. Allow me to introduce you to the Moonlit Faith, an elitist, murderous Chrysid religious cult that masks their true intentions with decrees from their leader, the mysterious Lady Confessor. All of which I'm about to show you has been lying in plain sight all this time, with no man daring to investigate. Come with me as I tell you a story of missing persons, cryptic hints, and a web of lies. At the center of it all, Deepwoken's very own religious cult of Chrysid refugees. This is what I've been working on all this time, and you won't find this anywhere else. That's enough talk from me, though. Grab your popcorn, clutch your drinks, remember to subscribe, and toss your Goonabait thumbnails to the side. It's time to solve this mystery. Lore Summer. Right, so this whole thing starts with a couple of NPCs in Great Hive Aratel. As I'm sure you've gathered by now, there's a couple factions in the game that receive the most attention in terms of updates or lore drops. One of them is the Hive. Precisely where this story begins, with an NPC to the wayside of the Great Hive, entirely out of the way. Enter Liviu, a Chrysid who, despite clearly arriving at the Great Hive with purpose, feels extremely out of place here. Well, that's because he is. He's a traveler from the Lullaby Isles. It's from Liviu that we first learn of the place, as he was chronologically the first NPC mentioning the Isles to touch down in games, from what I can gather. We learn that the Isles are, well, islands surrounded by water. We don't know much more than that in terms of geography, but we do get some information on what exactly Liviu's been sent here to do. Research, diplomatics. You see, how it's meant to go is, every year, once our Confessor decrees it, our Echelon sends a few of us archivists here to deal yearly records of heritage, births, deaths, all the sort. He gestures to a passing Chrysid in similar garb, parchments in hand. They ignore you both. We do an exchange, we go back home. You could call it a celebration of our once-distant ancestry. Must be all backlogged now, the poor Ekti at home. Eagerly waiting for our arrival to ship us with piles of documents right off again, with that acolyte keeping us all on a tight leash. Can't wait. The acolyte, a lead ambassador of sorts if that helps, communicates the Confessor's needs and decrees with the outside world. Leads a group of us archivists to be students under her work here, learning all there is to know about the niches and delights of document sorting. Then, once we're either useful or annoying enough, they send us back so we can put our skills to work in one of many archives. I'm trying to go for the latter. This dialogue from Liviu gives us a couple hints as to the history behind the Isles. He implies that the Hive and the Isles formerly shared ancestry, essentially confirming that the Isles originated from Chrysid defectors from within the Hive. Every year, these Chrysids return to the Hive in order to collect historical archives and share their own in return, in an effort to maintain positive relations between one another and continue to share their history. It's quite a sweet notion, actually. Now, that's not all that Liviu mentions. He speaks of an acolyte, who stands as an ambassador for a character known as the Lady Confessor. It's abundantly clear that this Lady Confessor essentially rules the Lullaby Isles, so now we have an established chain of command. The Lady Confessor, the acolyte, the archivists, and then everyone else, presumably. Great, well, problem solved, right? We have our answers. In case you've already forgotten, the Lullaby Isles aren't exactly accessible in-game, so where's the cult activity? What's there to care about? This looks like just boring administrative world building. Well, at first I thought the same, but you've seen this video's title. So, do they really burn people over there? I don't want to talk to you anymore. Something's off here. This question may sound like it's coming out of the blue, that's because it is, but the way our character presents our inquiry makes it sound like this is a common rumor. All rumors start somewhere, and Liviu's reaction to this question makes it clear that there's a lot he's not telling us. He also left us with a lot of questions. Who is the Lady Confessor? What's the structure of command in the Lullaby Isles? Do these Chrysalids actually burn people alive? There's many more NPCs that can help us solve these questions, but I do have to warn you, this is the point of no return. Beyond this point, solving this case is going to get increasingly messy, and you may have to do some thinking of your own. Choose to come with me, however, and we'll solve the mystery of the Lullaby Isles together. Okay, so the very first place you should look after Liviu is in the very same building, the same room even. If you turn away from Liviu and walk a few rooms to the right, there's a Chrysid waiting for you in the Great Hive's library. This Chrysid's name is Hiri, and he has a lot to share about the inner workings of the Lullaby Isles. If you've seen my videos before, you know that I typically like to read NPC dialogue in full aloud, but if I did that for every NPC in this video, we'd probably be here for 20 hours instead of 30 minutes. I hope this video is 30 minutes. I'll make an exception for Hiri here though. There's a lot to get through. Something wrong, Traveler? You've been staring for a moment now. Surprised to see a Chrysid in the Great Hive? I don't see many Chrysids around here. Why is that? Well, most of my ancestral folk had left many ages ago. Most Chrysids, in fact. Only a rare few stayed with the Great Hive. They're the only species of hivekin to this day that has succeeded in such a withdrawal. What happened? Why did they leave? Well, to put it simply, a difference in ideals. While the Ganymedes and Vesperians of the Hive believed in a future of eternal bark, reaching ever higher in a technological sprawl, the Chrysids saw it differently. To them, they believed steadfast in our religion, the moonlit faith. They believed our roots would decay and weather with the waves, while the moon's eye above could never touch the sea. So the Hive believes in technology and the Chrysids believed in religion? Aye, my ancestral folks were always a reclusive bunch. They mostly kept to themselves, that is. They departed en masse during the construction of the first Great Hive, most forming small settlements of their own on splinter islands, growing their own little societies. So they're scattered? Indeed. Most still rarely travel from their villages unless on some sort of pilgrimage or so their faith demands. They tend to keep to themselves, although they have quite a way with words once you're more acquainted with them. What are their villages like? Quiet and lonely. Most reside within an archipelago known as the Lullaby Isles. It's surrounded by a dense mountain range at sea, off the coast of Markor. Multiple small islands are within the region, with each village serving under the Lady Confessor. Lady Confessor? Within the central mass of the Lullaby Isles is a city-state known as the Echelon. It's the center of the Moonlit Faith's beliefs and where the Council of the Faith resides. The Lady Confessor is a cruel woman. She declares what is sin and what is not, and deals punishment to sinners. Punishment? A grimace grows upon the man's face. I don't want to talk about it, friend. I've already lost most of my kin to those beliefs. I do not wish to remember it. What led you to leave them? The man looks off to the side, frowning slightly. Well, I wouldn't describe it as leaving, per se. Just as they had different ideals compared to the Hive, I had different ideals to them. Faith never did any good for me, Traveler. I hold no bearings in such things anymore. There's a whole lot here, and here he stands as our first real introduction into the Lullaby Isles without all of the flavor text bullshit that Livio is spewing at us. Trust me, I cut out a lot from this video. Anyways, we learned that the first Chrysids to touch down at the Isles were defectors from the Great Hive, being the only species of hivekin to do so successfully. Why that's the case is unknown, but we can probably assume that the Hive didn't want a repeat of a whole species just up and leaving to make their own religious faction. Here he cites religious differences as the reason for the split, stating that the Chrysids who now reside in the Isles are firm believers in something called the Moonlit Faith, which is what I mentioned earlier, a religion revolving around worship of the moon's eye. The rest of the hive's population clearly didn't agree, and thus the first believers of the faith dipped from the hive in droves and settled on the Lullaby Isles to form their own society instead. We learn more about the Isles' geography as well. The Isles are a series of smaller islands, concealed within a mountain range off the coast of Markor. We also receive another mention of the secretive Lady Confessor, not only confirming that she is indeed the commandeer of all the islands harboring the Moonlit Faith, like we suspected, or I suspected, but that she directly decides what is sin in terms of the Isles' religion. She's also described as a cruel woman, and it's here that we hear word of potential punishment once more. Here he tells us that they've lost many of their peers to this punishment, but they refuse to tell us the exact circumstances of what happens to sinners. One thing's for sure though, those rumors we asked Livia about, the faith burning people alive, are looking more and more likely. Something is wrong with the Moonlit Faith. Here's where we got some help from one of the game's only lore-heavy features, the glossary entries. Upon viewing the dialogue of both Liviu and Hiri in-game, there's a couple underlined terms that you can click on. This will open the corresponding glossary entry for the term, and there's a couple of them here that actually do apply to the Lullaby Isles. The important entries are as follows. The Chrysid homeland, a fruitful archipelago surrounded by a treacherous mountain range. It's said that a few can come out, and only that same few are allowed back in. Home to the Moonlit Faith, a devout religion that revere the passage of souls to the Moon's Eye. The Echelon, a sprawling metropolis upon a central island in the Lullaby Isles archipelago. The center of activity for scholars, religious figureheads, and the Council, a bustling complex of archives and residences for those who live within. Notable for its pristine sandstone architecture, punctuated by elegant frescoes. The Council, the highest form of government within the Lullaby Isles, consisting of a handful of the greatest philosophical, theological, and academic members of the Lullaby Isles. Their purpose is to put the Lady Confessor's decrees into action and ensure the operations within the Echelon and wider archipelago run smoothly. The Lady Confessor, the mysterious leader of the Lullaby Isles, where her word is law. Not much is known externally of her location or condition, but interactions with scholars visiting the East suggest a sense of great reverence and sincerity towards her decrees. While there's not any major breakthroughs in these entries, they introduce a couple of new aspects to the Isles that we didn't know about previously. While we learn more about the Echelon that Hiri mentioned, learning that it's the centermost city on the centermost island in the archipelago, the most important information we get fed here is the mention of a body of government named the Council. They're identified as the highest form of government within the Isles, their decision-making power second only to the Lady Confessor. Speaking of the Confessor, there's apparently a great reverence and sincerity towards her decrees. Could these decrees be the reason the Confessor stands as the head of the faith and the reason why the Chrysids upon the Isles follow her religion so faithfully? Well, we're receiving conflicting reports here. While the glossary makes it clear that the Confessor is apparently fantastic at managing the Isles by way of the law, there's something fundamentally wrong with her governance. You may have heard tales of the Lullaby Isles, the Moonlit Faith, all that sort. We're kind of like that, but we do things our own way. Every one of us from our little community hails from that place. Whether they left out of anger, sadness, or pure curiosity, they're all welcome. Then why did you leave the Lullaby Isles? Had a tiny spat with a scholar mate of mine. Nothing serious, just some choice words said. He absolutely did not take it well. Threatened to name me a heretic, blackmail me over nothing, and well, if you don't know what happens to heretics, it ain't pretty. So I hopped out, decided to find my own way without fearing for my life because of some reckless idiot. Best choice I've ever made. This is Maro, a stray Chrysid you can find lurking near one of the mines set up in the Songseeker Wilds. He's abandoned the Isles and the Moonlit Faith, evidently due to the persecutions I mentioned earlier, but this paints the punishments everyone's been talking about up until this point in an entirely new light. The Isles don't simply deem you a sinner if you break the law, you're also a sinner if you object to the Moonlit Faith in any capacity and someone reports you. If anything, it's likely that both are true simultaneously. For all we know, the Lady Confessor could easily outlaw criticism of her religion. Now, these are textbook traits exhibited by religious cults, like the Manson family or the infamous community in Guyana, captained by Jim Jones in the 1970s, but there's a crucial piece was still missing, a confession from a current resident of the Lullaby Isles that these persecutions are actually happening, and that people are in real danger here. But Hermes, I hear you saying, if the Isles aren't in-game, how are we going to speak to someone who lives there? Fear not, my friend, we have Lake. Now, this NPC Lake was the subject of a Lullaby Isles related update recently, wherein their dialogue and location were entirely reworked. Port Desert, the developer responsible for the Isles, moved Lake from Upper Arisia into a cave in Songseeker Wilds, which is a whole subluminant away. Regardless, I'll cut back to Lake's current dialogue later, but it's their dialogue before the rework that's specifically of interest to us right now. If you were to speak to Lake before the recent Lullaby Isles content update, this is what they'd tell you. Excuse my musings, traveller, I'd happen to enjoy the scenery here is all. Such delicate flowers bloom, although none to be matched by the elegance of the night flowers from my village. Night flowers? You must be unaware of such things. Night flowers have great importance to my people, both in visual beauty and spiritual beauty. What makes it spiritual? Night flowers only bloom beneath the sight of one's absolvement in flame, the lacrimosa. When one bears sins too heavy to carry, they can volunteer to embrace the night flame, joining the moon's eye above in death. A night flower blooms beneath them after their passing. In my village, a sea of beautiful gleaming night flowers scatter over the hills and fields. It's truly beautiful, traveller. The Lacrimosa. This is the smoking gun we've been waiting for, the punishment that keeps the residents of the Lullaby Isles in check. Now, this is old dialogue, and it has been retconned, so you can disregard the rest of Lake's dialogue, but the Lacrimosa isn't a term that's exclusive to Lake. In fact, we'll see it again very soon. Thus, it's my belief that it's not the concept of this ritual that's been retconned, rather the place where it's been introduced. The point stands. Christed upon the Lullaby Isles are forced to follow strict religious teachings that are impossible to constantly maintain. And when they slip up and disobey the moonlit faith, well, they're being burned alive. Let's take a breather for a second, a short break from all the noise the Isles are throwing our way, and let's take some time to run through all the information we're currently working with. Alright, from the top now. The Lullaby Isles are a series of small islands surrounded by a mountain range off the coast of Markor. They were first formed when a group of Chrysids broke off from the Hive, as their religious views conflicted with the general pro-technological sentiment held in the Great Hives. Now, at some point in time, the Chrysids upon the Isles sent archivists back to the Hive to share their historical records, despite their now isolation from the Great Hives. This leads us to the current day. The Isles are currently led by the Lady Confessor, and the beliefs that put them at odds with the Hive initially have now ballooned into the Moonlit Faith, a full-on religion revolving around the passage of the souls flying up into the moon's eye. Under the Lady Confessor stands the Acolyte, her lead ambassador who works to communicate her needs and commands the archivists who are sent to the Great Hive. Beneath both of those two stand the Council, which is essentially the Lullaby Isles' ancient Roman Senate, a collection of the Isles' greatest minds who make the Confessor's decrees reality. This all sounds well and good, but under the Confessor's rule, the Isles are essentially an isolated religious cult. Children are taught to believe in the faith from birth, which I'll get to later, and if you ever sin, whether that's by breaking common law or standing against the faith in literally any capacity, you're punished. We now know the name of their capital punishment, the Lacrimosa, a ritual where any sinners are burned alive. We now know that the Lacrimosa has claimed many victims, if not from Lake's dialogue if you want to consider it retconned, then from Hiri, who states that they lost many of their peers to punishments. The Chrysids upon the Lullaby Isles are in grave danger, but they likely know no different. They've been born into an eternal cycle of religious damnation and punishment. The Moonlit Faith is all they know. As for what we know, there's still a lot missing here. We're not even remotely done with this case, and if you haven't been paying attention, this short break is nearing its end. There's still so many questions to be answered, like the nature of the Lady Confessor and her Acolyte, but don't fret, the Moonlit Faith wouldn't possibly be this simple. This is the good part, so let's strap ourselves in and take a peek at what else the game has in store for us. I present to you, Ossuary Maintenance. A set of esoteric notes. The book is soft to the touch and comfortingly weightless. Crisp iridescent sheets flick past as you browse. It seems to be a record of mundane yet foreign maintenance logs, and you flick to a page at random. No author is listed, and the text is printed carefully. It just seems to be an archived copy. Crypt surveys and maintenance due for our last eclipse of the year. As of this survey, crypts stand at 6,800 active passages, with an increase of 7 vacant ossuaries since. Confessor's degree, sub-echelon and rustic divisions. Satisfactory. There is to be no change to major routes for Nostria Eclipse this year. May she guide us. This is the first of 3 books that touch on the Moonlit Faith in-game, and we're immediately introduced to the defining geographical feature of the Lullaby Isles, the ossuaries. In case you don't know what an ossuary is, I certainly didn't until I started digging into this whole thing. It's defined on Google as a container or room in which the bones of dead people are placed. In fact, we see these notes clarified that they're basically crypts throughout. So, ossuary is a crypt. Okay, wait. Run that number by me again. Crypts stand at 6,800 active passages. 6,800 passages. This essentially confirms that the villages in the Lullaby Isles are built on top of ossuaries that likely stretch for miles. Now, there's a lot more here in this maintenance log, but I personally found it vague and confusing, likely deliberately so I'll sum it up quickly. There are 2 main points noted down here, Magna and Minor. Clearly Magna is a standard for major, meaning that one point is major and the other is minor, so one's more important than the other. The aforementioned major point tells us that there are tunnels beneath the Echelon, which is the capital city in case you forgot, and that they're starting to collapse. The reason these tunnels have taken extensive and irreversible pressure is due to the constant expansion of the historical archives. In fact, that this log mentions that osteo debris are obstructing the paths of archivists. Now, osteo debris isn't an official term from what I could find, but since it appears about 1 billion times throughout this log, I did some research. Osteo is relating to the bones, and thus osteo debris is bone matter. There's so many bones in these ossuary tunnels that they're flooding the archive room. If that's not some cult shit, I don't know what is. Besides that, there's a couple more notes about how to solve this problem, but they're very nondescript and terminology heavy. I don't have a place for them in this video, but that's where you come in. I'm going to be linking some of my notes in my Discord, link will be in the pinned comments, so take a look for yourself if you want to have your own crack at whatever the hell this means. Back to the topic at hand, these ossuaries are incredibly important to the story. They're not simply crypts where Chrysids toss a bunch of bones in and call it a day, no. These ossuary tunnels have a great deal of significance in both the day-to-day affairs of the Isles and the beliefs of the Moonlit Faith at large. Need more proof? Well, let's hearken to 2 people who I really should have talked about earlier. Lake, this time we're talking about her current dialogue, and Otilde. Otilde being the newest NPC added to Miner's Landing. Let's hear some of Lake's dialogue post-rework first. This Chrysid's eyes are wide with boundless wonder, fixed on the sky above. And to think such a far-off land had such beauty to it. What are you talking about? Sorry, you've caught me in a daydream. It's so different seeing our moon's eye from this angle. Our moon's eye? Her brow furrows, quizzically peering up at you. Do you not share in our love for our moon's eye? Are you not devoted? Are you not from around here? She shakes her head, tentative, confused. No, I'm Lake from Daphnis, on the Third Isle, that little village our acolyte hails from. I'm sure you know it. I'm sorry, are you lost? I guess a little bit. I'll get back home soon though. I was just going for a walk in the ossuary under our house, just for some peace and quiet. I was gonna be back for tea time, but it's definitely gone cold now. I hope my parents aren't worried. How did you get here? Well, I think I went a bit too far, crawled out into a lovely beach and decided to take a little stroll there too. I remember being really scared when I couldn't go back the way I came, but these really nice men on a boat spotted me and said they'd help me get home. It was my first time on a boat and that made me feel a bit better. Did they bring you here? Yes. The trees here look like the ones near my village, so I told them to leave me here and I'd make my way back. They looked kind of worried about it, but I told them I'd be okay. But guess what? What? The others here are so weird. They speak funny and don't do anything right. They don't even remember basic prayer. I thought I must have been on a different island to my home then, so I left. Don't think they wanted me around anyway. This is what we've been waiting for, an accurate testimony from a recent resident of the Isles, and one thing is made immediately clear. These ossuaries are vastly more important than we thought. In fact, Lake confesses that there's an ossuary under her house, which she ultimately got lost in. Whether the Chrysids are digging these tunnels out from under their houses or building their houses on top of the tunnels, their willingness to have an entrance to a winding grave passage in a house with children is very telling. Lake's account also reinforces other points I've made earlier, like children in the Isles being born into the Moonlit Faith. Regardless, it's important to emphasize that the Moonlit Faith's ossuaries aren't just for holding bodies, and Atilde, the second account I'm going to call on here, makes that abundantly clear. Are you trying to get home? She shakes her head, eyes wandering upon the ground as she gestures to the sea. My late mother's home. Me, I've known nothing but these clanks of steel here and that almost endless horizon. Her folks see the same horizon as I do whenever they look upon the sea, and I just don't think I can process everything without at least letting them know. Family? Mum lived in the Isles in her youth, surrounded by this deeply extensive family that I could only dream of. It's all she ever spoke about. The festivities, the meals, the dances, all shared together. She'd gush on about stories of whatever mischievous antics her and her thrice-removed cousins got up to, or some gossip about the tales of some estranged aunt. But as she grew older, so did her memory. Her brow would just furrow, and her lips would purse, telling fewer details of each story. Fading, muddling. Festivities. Yeah, these huge celebrations all over the islands, celebrating their heritage and history and other stuff like that. She kept rambling on about these great long hikes they'd have to do in great long ossuary tunnels underground. Mum was certain you could go from one side of the islands to the other through the underground. To me, it sounds kind of spooky, with all those bones in there, but I guess we're all different. Hikes to where? I'm not entirely sure. I think they'd go to these huge underground chambers where they held religious readings and dances, I think. The people in charge of their government thing parading their knowledge, making offerings to something she'd never get a peep of through the absolutely manic crowds. Mum would always refuse to tell me about what happened at the end of them, but no loss, it all sounds rather overwhelming to me. I think I'd rather be staying home anyway. Why'd she leave the Isles to come here? She never really explained. From what I remember, she soured at any discussion of anything else but her family. From what I could tell, at least, leaving was a great personal sacrifice. She always put it as differences with their government thing. The echelon? Not a clue. I know as much as you do, really. Boom. I shouldn't have to explain why Atilde's testimony is so revealing, but I will in case some of you tune out whenever there's words on screen. Atilde herself has no experience with the Isles, having grown up amongst the Ignition Union on Miner's Landing, but she does have the testimony of her mother, a Chrysid who was presumably born into the Moonlit Faith. Atilde's recounting of what her mother witnessed upon the Isles drops about 7 truth nukes on this case. Not only are the ossuaries confirmed to stretch underground across the entirety of the Lullaby Isles, but we finally get confirmation that these ossuaries are used for religious purposes. The account we get is harrowing. Within these ossuaries, there are huge underground chambers that they've been hollowed out for exclusively religious readings and dances, specifically during huge celebrations all over the islands, which sounds a lot like the aforementioned Nostri eclipse in the ossuary maintenance log. It appears that the Nostri eclipse is a celebration, likely related to the cycle of the moon, and when this celebration comes around, all the Chrysids walk through the tunnels in order to reach these large rooms of worship. Although, there's one more thing I haven't mentioned yet, specifically these lines. Making offerings to something she'd never get a peep of through the absolutely manic crowds. Mum would always refuse to tell me about what happened at the end of them. So, what was Atilde's mother praying to, and what happened at the end of each festival? Well, we've only got 2 sources on the Isles left, and they're both the largest lore drops accessible to us at the moment. Without further ado, let's tackle the last vestiges of the Lullaby Isles, starting with the strange missives. A collection of mysterious letters. The book itself is littered with pages of letters and notes, some stray sheets written in an unintelligible language, scrawled in an unknown print. Some documents are easy to make out, archived correspondence. From the wearing condition of the first letter sheet in the book, this is old, most certainly written several generations ago. Tharmati, most hold greetings from the echelon. The council has decreed it. Nostri eclipse is upon us once again, and we send our tidings and caution to our distant kin. As our ecti surge below the surface into our ossuaries, we urge your kin to avoid trespassing upon our festivities, and keep their craft clear from our islands. The all-too-familiar Mater Crypt will receive those who do not heed this warning into its sunken shores. As always, we send our kindest tidings from Our Lady, for Tharmata will be glad to know of the peace we have enjoyed since her sacrifice long since. Have faith in our practices. Her guidance continues to cradle our isles well. True faith survives such troublesome events. There is peace as she has promised. We have rebuilt plentifully since our most worrying ordeal. Our crypts have expanded greatly to all reaches of the archipelago. We pray for the safety of your own and Thambulo living under your protection. Galvika, our confessor's acolyte. Rifling through, a sleeker page appears, almost pearlescent in contrast to the previous letters were. It's silk to the touch. Part of the letter is again in the obscure language, yet it seems that there is a translation neatly printed beneath. Tharmati of Aratel, most insistent greetings from the echelon. We regretfully have to inform of a mishap with the academics you have entrusted us with. The council assures you that it was nothing of malicious practice. It seems that one, when being blessed with an exploration within our most beloved crypts, has run astray. We intend this to be received in the most comforting sense. One individual intended to make a souvenir of our heritage laid upon our walls, and henceforth shall not be returning to your great hive. For their trespass against our most sacred space, the Lacrimosa waits their attendance, and their repentance will be witnessed. We have since sent the other ambassadors on to their return, and they've been equipped with the requested copies of our archives. We hope the reminder of our common ancestry contained within them will kindle our distant friendships. We ask for more caution when selecting those to represent the best of the Amati. The Lassus, our confessor's acolyte. The other documents do not pique your interest, more unintelligible jargon and bizarre utterings. Certainly, this was not intended for your hands. Well, there you have it. The strange missives practically serve as confirmation of everything we've speculated on thus far. I'm sure you've noticed that this is the second mention of the Lacrimosa that I mentioned earlier, but I'll touch on that in a second because there's a lot to break down here. First, the mention of a Mater Crypt. This is another example of new terminology that we can break down with etymology. Mater means mother, so we can assume that the Mater Crypt is the Mother Crypt, which is probably the largest crypt the Isles held at that time. I say at that time because this first part of the missives are stated to have been written several generations ago. This is extremely important. Why? Well, the Lady Confessor is written about here. The Lady Confessor has been active for several generations at least, meaning that she's effectively hundreds of years old. That's not all we learn of the Confessor though. The missives speak of a sacrifice she made long ago. This coincides with the mention of a most worrying ordeal later in the missives. With this information, we can piece together that the Isles were the subject of some grand tragedy, and that the Lady Confessor made some sort of sacrifice to salvage the situation. Whatever this tragedy was, it required rebuilding, something that I have some thoughts on, but I'll save that for later. Regardless, the second half of the missives recount a mishap in the process of archive exchange. We know the second page of writing is much newer than the first excerpt touching on the Confessor, as the page quality is described as pearlescent compared to the rest. In this excerpt, the Great Hive has sent scholars to the Isles in order to collect their historical archives, a process which Liviu told us about way back near the start of this video. Regardless, the missives describe a mishap that comes about as a result of this exchange. A Hive scholar oversteps their boundaries and attempted to make a souvenir of heritage. To put it bluntly, a Hive scholar who was there to collect archives saw too much in the ossuaries and was thus subjected to the Lacrimosa. They were burned alive. In addition, Hort Desert has stated that we'll be seeing this acolyte, the Lassus, in-game, and thus we can assume that this excerpt was written very recently. Now, that's all the strange missives have for us, but there's one final text waiting for us in the dark. The neatly embellished notebook is the largest lore dump on the Isles that currently exists, and I've saved it for last because it requires a comprehensive understanding of everything that we've run over thus far, and it basically turns this whole thing on its head. Open your eyes, open your ears. Dare I say, open your hearts. We're approaching the finale. This notebook is neatly bound, embossed with rich iconographies of the Moon's Eye. The pages are packed to the brim with scruffy diary entries, doodle, and administrative jargon, written in an almost indecipherable script. Sheets of crumpled iridescent paper with aggressively slashed out paragraphs bookmark the pages. Intrigued, you flip to one of the most recent entries, hoping to find something legible. It seems to be a brief list, hurriedly jotted down. You imagine it must have been misplaced, considering it was just lurking upon a shelf. Week's supply of rations for the journey. Moon's Eye knows how long it'll take. Make sure Conrad requests his new uniform upon arrival. He will forget. Council documents. Make sure they're organized. Liviu has the right crates and bindings. Ensure the job is done. Have the rest prepare the cargo at least 2 days before. We will not be forgetting half our documents again like last year. Audience with our confessor. Perhaps he will let us in to speak with her this time. Turning to the next page reveals a short diary entry, scribbled furiously. Not allowed in. Again. Acting as if the central chamber is some exclusive little suite for him and our confessor only. Our confessor, not his. Must be spectacular company, that damn sarcophagus. Forgive me. Council's still trying to appease me with some second-hand good lucks and may she protect your journeys, but they know how much it'd mean to these new scholars to receive her personal blessing before this trip, especially considering that we're likely to have those authority terrors breathing down our necks. Those scholars don't even have a clue that there's even a risk of our ship being pummeled by those barbarous brutes as soon as we leave the archipelago. They've got no idea what an authority is. Wouldn't it be nice to put them in a good mood, instill them with good morale? No, the Vox refuses to see a soul. Some oracle insists the confessor keeps her word for the Nostri eclipse or some other grand event, Moon's Eye's sake. He barely even allows the council in. They're floundering without any substantial decrees on the progress of the Isles this year, but it seems the Vox is content with that. Or, well, it seems the confessor's content with that. I'm not sure which. Some oracle, Perfect at whipping up tired crowds at the end of their pilgrimage, but not at delivering the most important of advices. Or even when he does, it's some impassioned and nonsensical garble on the danger of heretics. No! We need this year's harvest dates, not paranoid rambling. Ugh! What mess. I can only pray our journey is uninterrupted. May the confessor protect us, whether we hear it from her or not. From all this examination of our own past, the Acolyte has always been entitled to receive an audience with the confessor and her Vox, and now it's all different. Everything's different. I'm convinced something's awry. With the Vox, that is, I daren't question our confessor. I pray the council checks on that man's tin brain or whatever's left behind that clamp of a mask. Or perhaps this is just the confessor's will and we ought to follow it. Perhaps time will need to tell. I've got my own problems at hand. So, the Vox. I wish I could describe to you the feeling in my stomach when I first mulled over this piece of writing. If you've reached this point of the video, you've likely realized by now that you've never heard that name before. In fact, I haven't even hinted at it. Well, that's because this is the only instance in the game where the Vox is mentioned. In fact, it's implied that this document has been misplaced, so it's very likely that his existence isn't even public knowledge. We don't even know who's writing this dialogue, but they do lament that the Acolyte has always been entitled to receive an audience with the confessor. Compound this tone with the concealed identity of the Vox, and we can assume that the person writing this is an Acolyte, specifically Thalassus, as is stated that this entry is one of the most recent. The main subject of this assumed Acolyte's writing is, evidently, the figure of the Vox. The Vox, as described in this writing, seems to have complete control over the Lady Confessor, or at the very least controlling her contact with literally anybody else. The Vox appears to be isolating the Confessor for whatever reason, and this is apparently causing the functioning of the Isles to rapidly deteriorate. The Acolyte clearly isn't happy about this, and the council is floundering, but it appears that neither have any say in the Vox's affairs, which is very strange considering they've been established as the main forces of leadership within the Isles beyond the Confessor herself. But that's the last of the in-game content, so it's time to get started on what you came for. We've broken this case wide open, so let's put the pieces together, once and for all. The Lullaby Isles were first inhabited after a split with the population of the Great Hive over religious beliefs, after which countless small villages were built across the islands. At some point, ossuary tunnels were constructed deep beneath the villages, forming a network of crypts that lead all across the Lullaby Isles. The Moonlit Faith, the Isle's central religion, used these tunnels for storing leftover bone matter following either natural death or the Lacrimosa ritual, where people are burned alive. These ossuaries were also repurposed into ritual sites, wherein the population of the Isles traveled to large underground chambers of worship during the Nostri eclipse, a grand celebration of the Moonlit Faith. At some point, the Chrysids upon the Lullaby Isles began to share their historical records with the Great Hives as a show of friendship, however refusing to allow ships from the Hive entrance to the Isles during the eclipse. Sometime after this agreement, the Lady Confessor, the mysterious leader of the Isles, made some grand sacrifice to either prevent or help recover from a completely unknown disaster that required the Isles to later rebuild their crypts. This disaster presumably caused the Isles to rapidly expand upon their earlier ossuaries and develop the grand expanse of tunnels we are familiar with today. Recently, an academic from the Hive was sent to collect archives and stepped too far into the ossuaries during the eclipse, and was thus subjected to the Lacrimosa. We have also now learned of the Vox, who is preventing someone we assume is the current acolyte, the Lassus, from talking to the Lady Confessor, as well as halting the Confessor's communication with the Council, responsible for enacting her policies. Okay, that was a lot, but I want to preface that that's the full recap done, and everything from here on is theory territory. Take my word with a grain of salt, and don't blindly trust everything I say. I have to clarify this after the Mud Skipper video and the Primadon is a Cruellian bullshit. I'll just move on. Remember to think for yourselves, but in case you haven't noticed, there's some major questions left over here. Who is the Vox, and what goal is he attempting to achieve? What kind of disaster struck the Isles? What kind of sacrifice did the Lady Confessor make? And who is the sarcophagus key to the Vox in the central hall that the Lassus mentions? For those of you intimate with my struggles concerning that last question, one of you in particular, you'll know that I was particularly hung up on the term sarcophagus used in the neatly embellished notebook. It just didn't make any sense to me, and honestly, I felt defeated. After all, I was trying to solve a puzzle before all the pieces were in game. The nature of the Vox was something that kept eluding me, so I was close to resigning this case and leaving it there. I mean, what else could I do? I suppose we'll never know what the Vox's sarcophagus is, unless... That'll do it. Surprise, surprise, my super evil and influential black magic content creator connections, not really, I'm not determined, got me into contact with the man behind the law I was investigating, the curator of the Lullaby Isles, if you will. Now, he didn't tell me much, nor that I want him to, because that would defeat the whole purpose of this video, but I was allowed one question. A single question I could have answered as long as it wouldn't give away any major plot points. I asked the following. What is the sarcophagus, as much as you can say within reason? I received the following answer. The only thing in the chamber with the oracle. Must be spectacular company, that damn sarcophagus. It's the only thing in the chamber. Certainly a great big chamber. Now, this may not sound like much to you, like a cop-out answer, something we knew already, but to me, this statement blew this whole thing wide open. For you see, the Lassus said that the Vox is refusing to let anyone into the central hall to see the Lady Confessor. She must be the oracle Hort mentioned then, right? Wrong. If you think back to the neatly embellished notebook, the Lassus referred to an oracle over and over. Who was she talking about? The Vox. We have the identity of our sarcophagus, my friends. Our very own Lady Confessor. The only thing in the room with the oracle. Now, why would the Lassus refer to the Lady Confessor as a sarcophagus? Well, why do you think? She's either dead, crippled, bound, or immobile. This is the sacrifice that the Confessor made, giving up her bodily functioning to prevent or help quell the disaster that reportedly struck the Isles. As she's now unable to speak or leave the Great Hall due to these circumstances, she needs the Vox to communicate for her. The Vox. Her voice box. The Vox's intentions are admittedly an entirely different matter. The Vox has been an established position since, we can assume, the Confessor's sacrifice. The Lassus tells us this, saying that the Acolyte has always been entitled to an audience with the Confessor and her Vox. There's another part of this neatly embellished notebook I would like to draw attention to, however, particularly this line. I pray the Council checks on that man Tin Brain, or whatever's left behind that clamp of a mask. Tinned brain feels like a particularly deliberate adjective, tinned as in preserving something for long stretches of time, and the comment whatever's left infers that this Vox has been in this position for a substantial period. I'll cut to the chase. I think the Lullaby Isles have had the same Vox all this time. Whether it's by the same means as the Lady Confessor or something else, I believe that the Vox may potentially be immortal or, at the very least, have an extended lifespan. There's one other thing I haven't mentioned, however. Behind that clamp of a mask. What if, and I mean if, because this is stretching into complete speculation here, the mask the Vox is wearing is that of a Hive Lord? What if the reason the Confessor and the Vox remain alive is due to Lifeweave magic? Imagine for a second, just like Siren, that the Vox was responsible for reviving the Confessor after her grand sacrifice, in an attempt to preserve her decrees. And imagine, just for a second, that whatever he resurrected was so bloated and inhuman that it was incapable of leaving the central chamber. Enough to drive anyone mad over time, enough to drive anyone to reclusiveness. It's certainly a great big chamber. Now, unfounded speculation aside, this is where my theories meet their end. While I'd love to magically solve all the loose ends left for me here, that's simply not possible with what I have at the moment. This story isn't complete just yet, and I've got word from Hort that the open questions we've been left with will be receiving answers soon enough. Regardless, let's take one last look at what we do have. A remote religious cult built on a labyrinth of ossuaries, the unrelenting burning of innocence, and a Lady Confessor dependent on a Vox herself. As for what this Vox desires, their intentions behind restricting the Confessor to only their eyes, we may never know. But one thing is abundantly clear. The Vox is taking matters into his own hands, and is radicalizing the Chrysid population, one way or another. Now, I'd like to finish this video with a reading of the oldest Moonlit Faith related book in-game, O Pardoner of Mine. I simply didn't know how or where to fit into this video, so I feel it's a great note to leave off on. My name is Emma's Metal, and thank you for watching. God loves you. O Pardoner of Mine, I seek your guidance. Upon this moonlit faith I seek not the future ahead, but solutions for the past. Within my dreams I see only reflections of those distant memories, scattered upon the night flowers of which my kin has grown fond of. These flowers guide me, they guide me so far towards the ideology you impose upon us, devouring my family in the name of faith, connecting each flower to a name, a story, a burnt piece of Chrysid, so familiar to my touch. A life ripped away in the name of pardoning sin. O Pardoner of Mine, I seek your answer. To the questions I wail hopelessly into the night, clawing at the walls for why, oh why, Pardoner, must it be given up? To the countless Anika before myself, generations of blood, all deemed too sinful to live, why must we be sacrificed? When will my flesh be spared? When will my father be spared? Upon this moon's eye we pray to, upon these stars you will see our demise. Upon this star, this luminant, we become night flowers not from our own sin, but inherited sin. My mother's mother may have acted wrongfully so, but I am not her Pardoner of Mine. When I look towards you, I'm trapped inside the glass your fingers clasp upon, and within its reflection I see two of me. It's the very thing that made me believe, Pardoner. O Pardoner of Mine, your lacrimosa is the cancer that keeps me up at night. We pray only for the Lady Confessor to reap our kin in return. Her fingers are wrapped around our society, toying with the souls of those who only possess hope in their hearts, yet she still mercilessly plucks it out to replace it with devotion. Pardoner, is it devotion you seek? Is it devotion that the Lady Confessor seeks? When you promise us the stars, I promise my heart. When she takes your family too, promising you not only the stars but the moon's eye too, do you accept? When you watch your own kin burn, is devotion truly worth it? O Pardoner of Mine, you are a fool. This faith toys with us. It enchants us. It pulls us closer towards a demise we can never crawl out of. Your devotion to the slaughter of ourselves is not the future for us, my Pardoner. I seek light, just as you, but, O Pardoner of Mine, why must we light ourselves ablaze?